We're live. And I welcome all those online and all members of the public to this meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is John Barnes and I chair the Audit Committee, and I have with me the Chief Executive on my left, Lorna Ford, and on my right, the Deputy Chief Executive, Andrew Barnes. There are other officers present introduced as necessary. Without more ado, can I take the minutes as a true and accurate record? Everybody agreed to that? In which case, I will sign the minutes at the end of the meeting. Apologies for absence, please. That would be very useful.
Apologies received from Councillor Biggs, Chair.
Yeah. Yes. Councillor Biggs is celebrating his wedding anniversary, so I think we might congratulate him on that. Now we move to additional agenda items.
There are none, Chair.
None. Disclosure of interests and dispensation. Councillor Thomas.
Chair, as Chair of the Rother District Housing Company, I will be withdrawing from this meeting at the appropriate time, and I'd further like to give an undertaking that I will not discuss matters relevant to this committee and the Housing Company, even in private with members of the Audit Committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cooper.
Also a member of the Housing Company, Director on the board, so I will be withdrawing for that item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? There are none. Right. So we move on, and I welcome our auditors to this meeting, and we're going to look first at the Grant Thornton audit plan for the year, and I will ask our auditors to take us through that. Over to you.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. So we've got in front of you this evening the indicative audit plan. We call it indicative because whilst we've largely completed our audit plan for the year, there was still a small number of areas that we needed to complete. However, those areas are not significant and in my view would not materially change the plans in the plan in front of you. In the unlikely event that those items gives rise to a material change, then we'll look to bring the audit plan back to the committee. But as I say, I don't anticipate that will be the case. I'll now invite my colleague, Anand Shazad, to just take you through a high-level summary of the report.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, members. So as Ade has just mentioned, I'll be covering a high-level overview of the audit plan, which you will have within the agenda reports pack. As mentioned in the contents page, we've sort of considered the key developments in local government reorganisation as part of impact on our audit approach, and currently there are, in East Sussex, there are 6 councils which have submitted a interim joint plan for the local government reorganisation, with a final proposal to be submitted in September 2025. We will continue to review these developments as we conduct our audit for the 24-25 financial year. As part of the audit for 24-25, our key significant risks are management override of control, the pension liability, and the PPE valuations. Our materiality for the year has been determined at planning to be 1.56 million for the group and 1.48 million for the council, which equates to roughly 2.5% of the prior year gross revenue expenditure for the year. We have our proposed audit fees are £166,904 for 24-25, with the prior year being 169,759. In terms of our timelines for the audit, we will commence the audit for 24-25, the fieldwork stage, in September 25, continuing our fieldwork until November 2025, with our aim to present the audit findings report alongside the annual auditor's report at the 1st of December audit committee. I will now pause there, as you will have detailed of what I've mentioned in the audit plan. So if you have any questions, I welcome them now.
I think it might be helpful. We have some relatively new members on the committee, just to explain how you arrive at your figure for materiality.
So I'm happy to take that, Chair. So in terms of materiality from a group and a single entity perspective, we generally use the group operating expenditure and for the council operating expenditure. Within our plan approach, we have a range that we undertake in terms of different types of organizations, and that ranges from 1% to 2.5% of that group of your gross expenditure. And for yourselves, based on our risk assessments and planning that we've undertaken, you are at the top end of that range, hence the 2.5% that Anam referred to earlier on. So that's how we've determined that. What we will do again is once we get your draft accounts for the year, we will revisit that materiality, both in terms of what the revised accounts are saying, plus any other issues that may have arisen post our presenting this report that may require us to either revise that materiality upwards or downwards, or in some cases we will keep the planning materiality. So that helps determine the level of testing that we subject your key material balances within the accounts. And what we'll then do within the audit findings report is ensure that any matters that are above that, which management may opt to choose not to amend, it's unlikely we get to that position because we're heading to a qualification territory in that sense. However, what tends to happen is that we'll reach an agreement, those amendments, if they're material, are made to the accounts. We bring that to your attention. In addition to that, we'll also share with you any changes to the accounts below our materiality level and above the trivial value that was set, so that members have a clear view in terms of those amendments, whilst not material in aggregate, that has been made to the draft statement of accounts. I hope that's helpful in terms of explaining, elaborating in terms of our approach and the materiality.
That's very helpful, thank you. Are there any other questions that members want to ask about this audit plan? Yes, Councillor Delaney.
I just wanted to ask, the new IFRS framework, there's a fee that's to be confirmed for that. Do you know what that is likely to be, and in what way would you be auditing or helping us with monitor that change in framework for leasehold? Thank you.
Yes, so this is IFRS 16 on leases, which has been deferred for a number of years, and this year will be the first time it's coming in on the scope. When PSAA set the audit fees, which will be quite a while ago now, it wasn't clear when IFRS 16 will come into effect. So that scale fee which they set did not include IFRS 16. However, what we cannot do is set a set fee for everybody, because there'll be organizations where the number of leases they have is minimal, and in some other organizations it will be quite substantial. For yourself, I think you are at the lower end, but at this stage we haven't seen all of the working papers behind that. So my expectation is it's not going to be a significant sum, in that sense. But that's the reason why we haven't been able to quantify it at this stage. But just to show members that whatever fee that we ultimately agree with management, PSAA still has the right to veto that fee or amend or vary that fee in its sense. So whilst we do share the fee and agree that with yourselves, PSA still has, because the contract is with PSA, they still have the right to approve that fee or not, as the case may be. Apologies, we can't hear. I think your microphone is off.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, is there anything you want to say about the rest of the plan?
The final bit to add is in terms of the value for money. So our responsibility covers the value for money arrangements as well. Our work has not identified any significant value for money risk. And as Anam said, the work we'll undertake will look at the three mandatory areas, which are financial sustainability, governance, and the 3 E's as we refer to it. And as part of that process, we'll also be looking at progress in terms of the local government reorganization as well. So at this stage, the plan is to undertake a straightforward value for money work, and we'll keep obviously a watching brief over this year and I suspect coming years around local government reorganization, how that impacts on both yourselves and your other districts as well. But happy to pause there and take any further final questions.
Councillor Delaney.
Another one, just about where there was the absence of a contract with Wealden Legal Services. And this has been outstanding for quite a long time and seems to be very difficult. But I was wondering whether this fell within sort of an internal audit issue or external. Being a joint contract, I wasn't, from my own understanding, I wasn't clear about whether that would fall under you, Gary, whether you'd be checking up on that, or is that an external matter?
Well, I think the thing is, we all know that's a problem, so there's too much point doing an audit to tell you what you already know. You just, the deputy monitoring officer is I'll hand you over to the chief.
I don't think this one for this particular item. I think you can come back to it on the governance statement. We are asked to resolve that we take the audit plan for the year ended March 31st March 2025. We resolve that is accepted. We obviously have some concern about the height of the fees, but we recognise that is happening right across the country. But can I thank you very much for your attendance for that item. We turn now to the risk assessment. I attended a very useful seminar.
Sorry, we need a proposer and seconder.
Because it's a resolution, I need a proposer and seconder. Can I propose it from the chair and my vice chairman will second? Everybody agreed to that? That's unanimous. In which case, we turn to the risk assessment, and again I will ask our auditors to take us through that.
Chair, if okay, I'll take us through this.
You're going to take us through it.
If that's
Okay.
The auditors may wish to comment at the end, but if that's okay.
My apologies.
No,
to you.
that's fine, no problem. If I could just introduce myself, because I think there are some members around the table that I haven't yet met. I'm Charlotte Spendley. I'm the fairly new head of finance here at Rother. I joined in January, so good to meet you. So this paper covers a request from the external auditors. They've asked a series of questions of management and those charged with governance to aid their planning and understanding of the statement of accounts that they'll be presented with for 24-25 financial year in the next month or two. We drafted the response as officers, and then they were ratified by Andrew as a Section 151 officer, and then agreed with the then chair of the audit committee at the point of drafting. But for completeness, we need to ensure that the responses are fully reflective of those charged with governance, so this committee, and your understanding of the position. The responses are fully outlined in Appendix A, and we have included the 23-24 responses for context where they're available. Just some areas that are reflected in the 24-25 response that we've highlighted to the auditors. The recognition of the grants that we've received in respect of levelling up, because they will feature in the 24-25 accounts. The revenue pressures that the authority has faced in the year, specifically homelessness, but also our general reserves position, as members are aware. The issues that we face with the Hermes Investment Fund that this committee have previously been briefed upon. The fact that we have new valuers in place for this financial year, and those valuations are being undertaken. And of course, there's kind of wider issues like LGR, devolution that the whole sector face, and an update on our current arrangements for risk management. There are, of course, a number of responses which are very similar to the prior year. So as I said, the previous chair house considered the responses and was satisfied with them, but it is for this committee to confirm their agreement to those responses. Andrew and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Sorry, if we turn to Appendix A, that is the response we're going to be asked to approve. Are there any questions you have for Charlotte on that? Councillor Delaney.
Seems to be me all the time. There was no particular issues in there that I picked out. That seems like most things were covered. The only thing that that I was wondering about really was just an update on the Hermes Property Fund, because that seems to have been frozen in some way, and just what was the latest update on that, and what would be? Do we know what would happen, once that is ready to go?
Yes, so they have called a meeting for July, I think it is, another extraordinary general meeting. They are continuing down the path that we previously reported to the committee, where it is likely that in its existing form it will be wound up, and only pension funds will be eligible to move into the new fund that will be available. We will be asked to vote on those proposals again. The first decision was kind of vastly in favour. I think it was 90-something%. They needed 75%. Second vote will take place. I can't say for sure exactly what will happen, but given the first vote, it would seem likely that it will pass through. The positive for us is at the moment our funds are held, but we can't access them. They've frozen the fund effectively, as you said. If it was to be formally dissolved without it transferring to this new entity, it could take up to 3 years for our funds to be released. The positive of it transferring to the proposed model with the new trust is that the funds would be released much more quickly. So they are talking about later this year, I believe, that the funds would be released and available to us if that decision was passed at the next EGM. So I'm hoping by the July committee we will be able to have a firmer update for the committee. I say late summer for the release of funds, and I say that with slight trepidation because the documentation I've read is slightly contradictory. in one section it talks about July, and in another section it talks about Q2 2026, which would be a further year. So that's what we have at the moment. Hopefully that clarification will come at that next EGM, and our funds will be available to us.
I think although it's right to deal with this, it will fall in a different accounting year, and therefore, in a sense, this will be for Treasury Management later on this summer. But Councillor Thomas, you wish to...
I think, Chair, in view of what you've said, my question may be redundant. I was going to ask, do we have any idea yet what we might do with those funds if they are released? That may be premature, really, if they're not going to come along until later.
I think I'll look to Charlotte for a preliminary view.
Yeah.
But obviously, in a way, this will be for decision when we get to the point. But
Yeah.
Charlotte, have we got, or Andrew, have we got a preliminary view on whether we would reinvest or add them to our reserves for use?
That they just become part of our general funding, because you don't fund specific assets, etc.
Yeah.
So it would just avoid us having to borrow £3 or £4 million to fund our capital programme, for example.
Yeah.
It would just help with the cash flow that way. Is the most likely outcome.
Yes, I think the preliminary view is we would use it productively in the near future rather than reinvesting. If there are no other questions, again, I think we have to resolve that we agree the response we've made to Grant Thornton. Can I have a proposal for that? Yes, Councillor Delaney, seconded by Councillor Byrne. Those in favour, please show. Again, our decision is unanimous. Can I thank our auditors for their attendance and wish them well for the remainder of the evening. In which case we now move on to the annual governance statement, which presents the current position on progress towards achieving the actions that were identified through the annual governance statement for completion in the year 2024-2025. Are there any questions on this? Andrew, do you want to say a few words by way of introduction while people think about it?
Yeah, the appendix starts, I think, on page 83, where I think the 10 or so actions are covered. Most of them have either been completed or are well on the way to being completed. And obviously what we will do, I think probably, trying to think, a future meeting, will it be the next one? We'll bring the draft AGS for next year. In which case we will, if any that are not progressed, will appear again in that one for urgent action, I would imagine.
Councillor Delaney, I think this is an appropriate moment for you to ask about the outstanding SLA.
Yeah, so this is about the Wealdon thing and auditing, and how we just keep a check on track whether this thing is going to appear. What's the script with it?
Charlotte, do you want to answer? It will be you. Okay, thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. So this has been ongoing for some time. We do have a regular meeting between our monitoring officer, our deputy monitoring officer, Petra Deman, who's online this evening, and the legal team at Wealdon. And we've been trying to progress the SLA for actually some years now. The sticking point now is over key performance indicators and getting those finalised and targets for those. And I wrote to the Chief Executive of Wealdon last week to ask that work is progressed at pace. So that's the latest update. Petra Deman, who's online, our Deputy Monitoring Officer, may have something to add.
Good evening, everyone. I've got nothing to add, in fact, to say that I've received nothing since last week when our Chief Executive wrote the email she just explained. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Petra. Welcome to this, I think, your first meeting of the Audit Committee, is it not?
Yes.
Yes. Councillor Byrne, and then I've got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Auditing an extra or a shared service seems to have all sorts of inherent problems. Can we assume that Wealdon already have their own KPIs set against their legal service, and that they have the equivalent of an SLA with their legal service? And if so, are we reinventing the wheel, or do we consider their monitoring inadequate for our purposes? Perhaps just a sort of a general statement on how we audit shared services, and specifically legal, would be nice.
I think that Petra can answer that, since she's sort of involved in the day-to-day discussions with Wealdon.
Petra, would you care to answer that?
Yes, please, and thank you for that question. It's a very good one, because that's exactly our view here at Rother, that Wealdon are carrying out their own legal work. They must have their own information. They know how many cases they're producing. They know the time it takes to present and complete certain cases. That's all we're asking for. Instead, what we've received are blanks and 0 percentages. To create a service level agreement for going forward, you need data. You need information to feed into monitoring to go forward. And that's all we're asking for. I'm sure they have a case processing system. I'm sure that will help. But as it stands at the moment, we're still waiting for that information. So we're certainly not reinventing the wheel. We just want the information.
I suppose at a pinch we could FOI, but actually my question is very pertinent to this, which is, have we the right to haul the officer responsible for their end of the contract to this committee and ask questions of it?
I'm looking to Petra.
Petra, did you hear my question?
I did hear your question, I don't think, with respect to the question, I don't think it would be appropriate. We have a good working relationship with Wealdon. They are carrying on with our work. We just need to formalise it. And I understand the frustration, but I think if we just keep the pressure going, I think that may be the very best way forward at the moment.
You might care to transmit the fact the question was asked, because we are dealing with years, not months.
I know.
Yes, but give you access.
On the 23rd of June, we have our new Director of Governance starting at Rother, Buttersing.
Sorry.
And one of the first things that he wants to do is visit the legal team at Wealdon, build the relationship, because as Petra says, they're still doing work for us. So, it's an important relationship. So he'll be joining on the 23rd, and one of his priorities will be to get this SLA over the line. We had hoped that we would do that before he starts. We haven't been able to, but, at future meetings, he will be able to come and update you on how that relationship is going, and hopefully we'll get that signed as soon as we possibly can. But I think we will feed back the frustrations of the committee. I think that is important.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just have confirmation that we are satisfied with the quality and promptitude of the legal services we get from Wealdon? It's just where it comes to supplying statistics and the SLA where they're falling behind.
I think we know, actually, from some of the recommendations we've had to this committee in the past and some of the discussions, that things do need to improve, and part of the improvement is accountability and understanding how we are actually doing against those performance standards. So it's very, very difficult for us to say at the moment whether they're meeting their obligations or not, because they're not articulated in a way that we're able to measure. So I think that's why it's so important that we have this measurement, and that's part of the SLA going forward, because there have been some performance and delays. I'll be quite honest about that.
So that would give us some clear evidence on which to base a judgment. That would be great. Cheers.
The other question I had, Lorna, is about the scheme of delegation. Can we have an update on where we are with that?
Yes, Chair. The reports actually have been drafted for the scheme of delegation. We've just been waiting for the final piece of the restructure last year to fall into place, and that's the appointment of the director that I mentioned just now. So it will be coming forward very, very, very soon.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any other questions about this report? In which case, we need to actually approve it. Are you happy to move? Seconded by Councillor Cooper. All in favour? Excellent. We now move to agenda item 8, which is the annual governance monitoring report on Royal District Housing Company. Councillor Thomas and Councillor Cooper have declared an interest in this, which is prejudicial, and they are withdrawing from the room. Thank you very much. We will let you know when we finish this item. This concerns, in particular, the current arrangements for the local authorities' governance of a wholly owned company. Effectively, up to now, this has been done by an officer body, and the feeling, I think, shared by the company and by the council is that really this is not appropriate, that the shareholder responsibility should be exercised by elected members, obviously calling to committee whoever they wish and taking advice from the officers. The suggestion in 2 is that a new subcommittee of the Cabinet should replace the existing shareholder representative oversight group. That has raised 1 or 2 concerns which have now been addressed. I'm very grateful to our Deputy Monitoring Officer, who has done a great deal of work on this, and in particular, as will become apparent, has conducted a survey of numerous local authorities across the country to see what arrangements they have in place. The one change which I think probably we need to do in the documents that are in front of you is I think we do need to assure ourselves and assure the company that the purpose of this shareholder meeting will be to exercise the shareholder representatives, not to take operational control of the company. Otherwise, we might fall foul of companies legislation, which is drawn pretty widely, but operational control is clearly exactly why we didn't keep the thing in-house but established a company. But it seemed to me worthwhile that we put that in, as I think 2 certainly of our parallel authorities already have a useful phrase, which I think we can incorporate in these documents. Are there any questions or comments? Sorry, I'm not. It's Councillor Projak. Oh yes, Councillor Projak. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Thank you, John. I've just been reading quite recently about housing companies and the ones that work and the ones that don't work. And clearly the ones that do work they actually play a key role in delivering new homes, and that's why we created this company. But then there are some that don't work, and the ones that don't work are where there's no joined up thinking with the council, and the governance arrangements are not clear and they are not accountable. And so there's been a failure in the ones that don't work, and there are not many. There are far more that are successful and have very clear purpose. And I just wanted to say that if you can remember back in September when we had the briefing then about the housing company, and it was dire. It really was a dire picture where inflation was added to 6.3 million. If you remember, they were going to use market housing, have to have all market housing. And it's changed, it's turned around completely. So I think this is a really positive move to actually get the governance and member oversight very clear. That's all the comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Progress. We had a very bumpy start. I think everybody agrees that. I think the company is now in safe hands and is going to deliver on backfires, probably at a modest profit. Obviously, with the market as it is, nobody can be absolutely sure of that, but it looks to be heading in the right way. What I do think we need to do, the shareholder group and the board, is to agree some specific objectives over the next few years, so that we get some idea of timeline and some idea of what success is. And that, I think, will help both council to be reassured and the board actually to know that the direction of travel they're taking is one that we approve. So I would hope that that recommendation, that we work out exactly what we mean by success, will be taken forward by the new executive committee. We will have oversight of that committee in terms of governance. Obviously, overview and scrutiny will have overview of the performance. But if we don't have something fairly measurable, you can't really performance manage it. So it does seem to me that's an important recommendation that we should make. What I would also suggest is that I presume Petra, working under your authority, Lorna, will look at the documents as they stand in the appendix and make the necessary amendments agreed by over the weekend on the assurance that is actually being given to the board about operational independence, really. Well, it's not independence, it's autonomy is the right word. And if Petra will do that, I think we can approve the terms of reference with those two riders. Can I have a proposal in favour? Sorry, have I got enough? Councillor Project wants to come back.
Sorry to come back. Just on comment on what you've just suggested. The thing is that you should have clarity in the business plan, and that should be your guidance of where everyone is going.
Yes, I think my suggestion was that this was an agreed between the board and the shareholder about the direction of travel and the pace of travel. There are really three aspects. One you alluded to, Councillor Prochak, which is simply improving our build-out rate in good times as well as bad. Good times you can rely on the private sector and to some extent on the housing associations, although at the moment the latter are doing a lot to improve their existing properties rather than investing in new properties. A second one is really to help the small and medium enterprises who normally deliver more rapidly, but are always looking for capital. And that's obviously a second objective, which again, I think we can't specify how many or when, but we can suggest that by a certain date we should be doing at least one of those a year, because the target is now well in excess of anything that we've delivered locally. There may also be some other things which will be worth saying, but those two seem to me to give us some measurable goals for overview and scrutiny to monitor. Everybody happy with accepting the proposal I made from the chair and seconded by Councillor Delaney? All in favour, please show. I think we can now notify our absent members and give them a moment to return. Welcome back. We now move to agenda item 9, which is the work undertaken by internal audit in the year 2024 to 25. Gary, do you want to introduce this report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Each year I'm required to deliver an internal audit opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the Council's framework of governance, risk management and control. The opinion expressed in this report is based on the audit work completed in the financial year 2024-25 and the results which feed into the annual governance statement which will be reported to this committee at a later date. Other items covered in this report include the summary of the performance of the internal audit service in 2024-25, a statement on how well we conformed with the public sector internal audit standards, an update on the whistleblowing activity in 24-25, plus my usual quarterly update on audit activity. I'll now outline the key points in the report. Paragraph 3 on page 130 tells us that the 4 reports were issued in the final quarter of last year. The executive summaries of these are, as usual, they're in the Appendix A, which starts on page 137. The reports issued in quarter 4 are council tax, business rates, treasury management and payroll. All these reports received a substantial assurance rating, meaning no areas of significant concern were found. Overall performance in 24-25, full details of the audits completed last year are in Appendix B, which is on page 147. The appendix also shows that 87.1% of the planned audit work was completed on this occasion. This is slightly below our target of 90%, but this is mainly due to overruns on 2 audits which we found multiple control issues. This delayed other work, and some of this was still in progress at the end of the financial year. Implementation of audit recommendations, as always, every quarter I give you an update on where we are on the audit recommendations. The tables on these are in Appendix C, which is on page 149. The old years section, there's currently 13 recommendations still outstanding. Most of these relate to 23-24, but there are 5 older recommendations, one of which was issued in 2018. 2 long outstanding recommendations have been completed since the last quarter, and some of the remaining cases are now nearing completion, but overall progress remains slow. I'm hopeful we might see a few get over the line by next quarter. I discussed all the recommendations over 6 months old at the corporate management team in April, and have encouraged heads of service to review their outstanding recommendations attributed to their service areas more frequently, as I believe the Chief Executive and SLT have been doing as well. I also now intend to hold one-to-one meetings with all the heads of service on a quarterly basis, and will raise this issue the issue of outstanding audit recommendations with them when we meet. So I'm going to keep chipping away. The latest year's recommendations look in quite a good position. They've made good progress this quarter, and many have already been implemented. Now, the income protection work and other financial savings, that's paragraph 13 onwards. These two sections show the internal audit team's income protection activities and other audit work contributed to over £152,000 worth of financial savings last year, which I'm quite pleased with. Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, this is paragraph 16 onwards. This details the various methods used to measure proficiency, effectiveness and quality of the internal audit service. My annual self-assessment against the professional standards was reported to this committee last quarter, and the results of our latest peer review were reported in June 2023. And for those new members, we only have to do external assessment every 5 years, so that's still within that. Both demonstrate a high level of compliance with standards. We also usually capture client feedback throughout the year as each audit is completed, both from operational staff at what we call the exit meeting, which is when all the groundwork's done, and at the service manager level at the end. All feedback received on the operational management was positive. However, I did not manage to collect all the feedback from the service managers last year, and I will try harder this year. I've taken steps to make sure I get it this year. The client feedback received from operational management indicates high level of satisfaction with the quality of the internal audit service. Then we've got the performance measures in the table in para 21. This shows 3 of the 5 targets were met or exceeded. The targets for governance audits and overall completion of the audit plan were not met on this occasion because of the aforementioned audit overruns. Conformance with so there's quite a lot of bits and pieces in this one. Conformance with public sector internal audit standards. I can once again confirm that Robert's internal audit approach generally conforms with the requirements of our professional standards. Overall assessment of the internal audit controls. Paragraphs 25 and 26, the 2 areas of concern we highlighted last year are mentioned there. Whilst many issues have since been resolved, some areas of concern still remain, especially regarding the estate's income. Then the really important bit of this report, the opinion of the control environment, page 28 onwards. This sets out the basis for providing assurance on how well things are operating in those areas audited during the year. If we look once more at Appendix B, we can see that whilst 2 audits received minimal assurance rating, our lowest rating in last year, many of the issues identified have since been resolved, and the vast majority of the controls objectives reviewed during the year were met, at least in part. This leads me to my conclusion in paragraph 32. But the key point to note here is that taking all of the above points into consideration, I am still of the opinion that the Council's framework of governance, risk management and control is adequate and effective. Finally, the last bit in the report is about whistleblowing activity in 24-25. I get stuff sent to me through the fraud hotline, and I see if I can do anything with it, and then I forward it on to relevant people if necessary. Last year we had 20 cases. I received 20 cases through letters and emails and like. The vast majority of these focused on benefit and council tax fraud, or housing issues, or tenancy fraud. Right, that's it for me. I think if you've got any questions, happy to take questions.
Sorry, can I slightly structure this? Because there's so much in this report. First of all, are there any questions about the overdue things, the backlog on which slow progress is being made? I know that the Chief Executive intends to grip this, but are there any questions about any of those outstanding recommendations? No, that's fine. Can we look at internal audits, self-assessment and performance? Are there any questions about that?
It's not a question, Chair, but just to say the performance seems absolutely first rate, doesn't it?
I would agree with that. I think are very lucky in our internal audit team, and I think their self-assessment is always rigorous, which is good. Now, having got those two out of the way, I think probably we need to ask a little about what's gone wrong on the two major ones where our controls seem to have been inadequate. Does anybody want to address that in particular, or can I ask for comment? Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, it's obviously, it's very good to know at the end of that paragraph, I think it must be 26, that things are now very much better. That's really, really good. And obviously things, generally speaking, are going well. But I'm just curious about, why does it go wrong in the first place? Do you have a view on that, please?
I mean, the state's income, there's been a systemic failure there for years. I mean, which Joe Power's quite open about. You know, it's been under-resourced. It's all, and when we looked at it a few years back, it was just either still in the pandemic or coming out of it, and we cut them a lot of slack for things. We found quite a few of the same sort of issues then. We cut a lot of slack because obviously difficult times. But, you know, 2 or 3 years later, I've looked at the game and it's still in a bad situation. Things are improving because you'll get it in another meeting, but we're just doing a follow-up audit. But things like rent reviews and expired leases being sorted is still a bit concerning backlog there still. There's more to follow on that one. Delaware Pavilion and Hart Sidley Luff programme. Well, I don't know, the governance was quite bad on that one, unfortunately. But of all the recommendations, there's just one outstanding to be resolved. So I think that's, it shows that senior management take it seriously. There's been a change of people responsible as well, not as a result of the audit, but it happened anyway, because I think management already realised there was a problem there. And I don't know, I think Chief Executive to answer how it happened in the first place is probably not my place.
That's a difficult button to reach. The estate's income one is clearly worrying, given our financial position, because that is quite a substantial slice of income, which we're foregoing, and we can ill afford that. So can we first of all ask the Chief Executive to comment on that, and then we can come back to the two capital items.
Well, I do think that this audit was really, really helpful, but as Gary says, I think things have kind of moved forward in the work that you've recently done. Joe Powell, I think, has got a grip on this team since it's come under his domain, and he's worked really hard to get the right team together. So I'm really hopeful going forward that actually we will make progress against these recommendations, and we will actually, the team has been invested in. It's important that that investment is paying off, and that's something as a senior leadership team that we're really, really keen that we keep an eye on. So it's become something from a performance point of view that we really are keeping a very close eye on, and I'm grateful for the work that Gary's done on this one.
I move on to the capital items.
Just to say, Chair, that obviously in any organisation, things will sometimes go wrong. What matters is what you do when it goes wrong. And it sounds like we're dealing with it well.
I think the Chief Executive is good at that first one. The other, to some extent, highlight faults that I think have been there in our capital programme management all along, but the amount of time we've lost on contracts where the funding has come with quite tight time limits. I know we've been able to negotiate extensions, but to be a year behind on Sidley, and did anybody know we were even months behind? Why was no action taken sooner?
I think on Sidley and the Delaware, you know, the deadlines that were set for the spend on that funding were always unrealistic, and we knew that. And with any kind of approach that involves partners and making sure that we're getting the right schemes in place has been, you know, time consuming. And as Gary alluded to, you know, in terms of the governance and the structure that we had around the management of our capital programme, and particularly the LUF programme, it wasn't right, and that needed to be fixed. So a lot of work around governance, and again, making sure we've got the right project managers, the right programme manager in place, has made a difference, and things are now moving forward. But what I would say about, you know, particularly LUF, is, you know, we were always dealing with really unrealistic timescales, and that's not just us, that's across the whole country. So I think whilst we had improvements to make, the task that we actually had in hand was almost impossible to achieve to the deadlines that we were first set, and they have now been extended and far more realistic in terms of what could be achieved. So I think moving forward, we'll find that, you know, things will really make. Sidley in particular, I know we're all anxious to see a building there, and we're now on track, I think, to see that come forward. So, but it has been a quite painful process, if I'm completely honest. And there's learning from this, I think, from not only our side, but from the government side, in terms of giving this funding out and expecting projects to be delivered in unrealistic timescales.
Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, can I just ask, is it the government that was setting the unrealistic timelines, or are we setting them ourselves? Are we setting ourselves up to fail? Which...
Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, the government, I mean, on this project, you know, we did bid for Levelling Up funds. It was different for Levelling Up Partnership, where they kind of said that we would receive this funding, and then a selection of projects came forward. But it was absolutely the deadlines set by the government that were unrealistic. So, you know, that's, and we've learned so much. I think, you know, I've worked at other councils that have had more of a kind of more experience in delivering these kinds of projects. So I think as an organisation, we kind of had to learn as well, and how we needed to be set up and structured, and all the governance around that. So we've definitely learned from that. But absolutely, some of the, you know, timescales were never going to be achievable.
Yes, Councillor Byrne and then Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the Chief Exec, really. We appoint project managers. When we do that, do we also specify the level of reporting we expect from them? It strikes me that some of these project managers didn't actually have the overview of their own projects, let alone be in a position to tell us whether they were on target, or, as is mostly the case, how far they were behind and why. So is one of the learnings we take, oh, did I use that word? It's one of the things we've learnt going forward, that it's a two-way process. When you employ a project manager, you have to say, what methodology are you using? That's up to them. But you have to look and say, we don't believe this methodology will give us the required overview that we need. Are we moving towards that level of control now, having learned from our mistakes?
Yes, in short. And of course, we've set up a team, the corporate development team, the capital development team, sorry, to actually have oversight of these projects. So both, I mean, we had hoped to appoint to a head of service level role to have oversight of that team, and it's very difficult to appoint to that role. We went out twice and we weren't successful. And one thing we have been very conscious of is our dependence on external consultants for the project management and programme management, and that's something that we're hoping to reduce over time. But we have found that the market is quite buoyant, and the public sector can't necessarily attract those roles in-house, so that has been quite difficult. But the one thing that we have done and spent a lot of time looking at is our corporate programme board, and that's a member board that meets on a regular basis to have oversight of our capital programme and our Fit for the Future work as well. So it's having oversight of all of that, and that kind of rigour, and actually the questioning that has come from that board and the challenge from that board, I think has really pushed things on to improve the accountability of the project managers and the programme managers to that board. The overall programme is one that I feel now that we all understand where we are, and we all understand where the projects are, we understand the reasons why there are delays, when there are delays, and we're improving the comms on that too. There's more to do on the comms, I think, but you know, we are using our website a lot more to communicate where we are with projects, you're right, we have learnt a lot. So in terms of methodology, we kind of have a corporate way that we expect the reporting to happen. So that's the consistency, and we expect our project managers and programme managements to have the appropriate qualifications. So, you know, we do expect a standardised approach when it comes to reporting.
We seem to have an excellent methodology when it comes to internal audit of where our own processes are going and where our own performance. Hopefully, that sort of methodology will inform the way in which we're going to question our project managers in future, because we already have an audit methodology internally that we consider is adequate. So I'm sure we are learning from our internal capabilities, as well as just relying on external consultant who says, yes, I know what I'm doing.
Just to come back on that, if I may, Chair. So even if they are an external consultant, they have to follow our way of reporting and have to provide information, and some attend our corporate programme board. So it is absolutely, it doesn't really matter whether they're external or internal, we all follow the same way of managing those projects. So things are improving, and I have to say, just in the last few meetings, it's really felt like it's turned a corner in terms of the level of challenge and the answers that we're able to give, and just knowing where we all are is obviously really important. So I think that is moving in the right direction, and we just need to work on the comms a little bit more, and I think that would really help too.
Thank you very much, Lorna. I'm very pleased to hear what you've got to say about the degree of thoroughness with which project management is being done, keeping a check on it, and also the communication around it. All that's absolutely excellent. And I think one of the things we should bear in mind is that some of the problems around the Delaware Wall project actually were internal to the Delaware rather than to the council. And I think the Delaware was the first organisation to say their internal processes needed to be improved and have been improved. So I think we shouldn't blame the council too much for that.
Councillor Delaney.
I think with those two projects, to be honest, I can imagine with the complexity and the size and scale of the Delaware project, I think that was, it needing an extension in that way is unsurprising, perhaps, or less surprising. As a new build, the Heart of Sidley project should have been more within our control, and so that is more disappointing. But just where you were talking about the necessary extensions for both projects, it was really disappointing with the sports centre proposal, the new sports centre, and that wasn't able to go ahead because of, as I understand it, timescales. Was there no? Forgive me for my ignorance in this, but would it have been possible to extend that, or what? I know I'm going slightly off this report in asking that question. Forgive me. I'm interested.
It's not related to levelling up funds. That was a levelling up partnership, but the timescales on that project or that programme were really, really tight and weren't going to change. So unlike LUF, which was the Levelling Up Fund, which has been extended, the timescales that we had to bring forward a really, really ambitious project just weren't possible, unfortunately. But the good thing is we kept that funding, And that's what we're really, really focused on, making sure that those funds remained within ROTHA.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Delaney. I think that Delaware was always going to be extremely complex. I'm not surprised. I am slightly startled and a bit dismayed at the Heart of Sydney. We really ought to have in all these projects something which we regard as a piece of litmus paper that suggests that something's going wrong at a very early stage. But we tried to do that in the capital programme at County and also in the health service, because it would be a pity if the problems that we address here are going to be faced at somewhere like Barnard Road, for example. So I hope very much that the improvements you've put in place, Lorna, will result in the kind of capacity to deliver. The trouble with external consultants is they sometimes take decisions without telling you they've taken decisions, which actually affect timescales. So managing the external consultants is sometimes a skill in itself. And I think that's the lesson we learned from the Blackfriars project. I think there's considerable signs of improvement, but keep up the good work, because the capital programme is very important indeed. Yes. Councillor Bayliss, you wanted to come in.
Yes, I just wanted to say something about the partnership programme and the Levelling Up Fund. I mean, I oversee the partnership funding, and Councillor Timpey oversees the Levelling Up Fund. That's how those two things have been split. But I am also on the corporate programme board, as you know, such, we've obviously started to really focus down on Sidley, because it is now a year after when it should have really been completed, and a lot of the discussion so far is is true, but I have to tell you, and I mean, I have told officers this, that there is a big reputation damage here for the council, and I think we have to work really hard now with, especially Heart of Sidley, our partners, to regain confidence with them that we can actually deliver this project. It is, as I say, it is a real shame, but it is. There is lots of facets of areas that didn't quite go to plan. For example, none of the bids that we received were within the budget that we set. All of them were over budget, and that's a combination of the sort of inflation in building material costs post-COVID and post-Brexit that you'll be very familiar with, John. But it's things like that. So I mean, whereas we thought we would be signing a contract several months ago, we have had to embark on a big exercise in revaluing the work and revaluing the tender to bring it bring it back down to budget, and that's taken a long time. But as I say, in doing all of that work, we perhaps need to, think about how we manage our partners. But the final thing I'd say is the corporate programme board. We are on top now of all the projects, and we are asking challenging questions at every meeting. And I agree with the chief executive. It's really improved. In the last couple of meetings, with much more confidence now that we've got a grip of where we are with all our projects.
Grateful to you for what you've said. Yes, I think value engineering is quite commonplace. And of course, we have been in a time of rapid building cost inflation. But of course, the more the delays, the worse the situation gets. So in a sense, it's quite important to build in adequate contingency and adhere to timetables. And I think the lessons have been hard learnt, but I think we're reassured that they have been learnt. And we look to an improvement in the delivery of the remaining projects. Right, I think now we need just to talk a little about the reorganisation. I think this committee will want to make a recommendation to the Chief Executive and those who are actually looking at reorganisation. We think it quite important that at a very early stage in the reorganisation, a shadow internal audit team is put in place. We think that will be extremely helpful going forward to have a robust internal assessment going on. And we're wondering how to best take that forward. But we would ask you to look at that as a quite powerful recommendation.
We are talking local government reorganisation and not structural
Yeah.
reorganisation. Oh, okay. Oh, is it for the next agenda item, Gary? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I can certainly look at that. I do think Overview and Scrutiny Committee have a role in LGR, and we have a key decision coming up on the 26th of September. We need to submit our proposal to government. Yeah. And we've planned we will be planning an additional Overview and Scrutiny Committee to scrutinise that submission. I'm not quite sure how that audit committee would work and the kind of decisions, because of course we're not wholly in control of the whole process. We are a partner, we are one of 6 councils that are working on this. So I think I need to think quite carefully about how that would work and how it would add value to that process, but I'm very happy to take that away and give it some thought.
I think our thought was less about the audit committee and more about internal audit itself, because clearly the audit committee will be a matter for the shadow authority. But I think as part of our planning, a robust internal audit function.
I do apologise, I've misunderstood you. You're actually talking about the internal audit function into the new council? Right, okay. Well, that is something that we can talk about. I have to say our focus at the moment is on the submission because we don't even know what the footprint of the new council will be. But when we do, I think that we're very keen to take a kind of co-design approach to the new council and make sure that, actually those central functions, you might say that HR is another really important aspect that we need to consider, how that will work. Sorry, I completely misunderstood where you were coming from there, but we can certainly make sure that internal audit is high on the list of things that need to be looked at.
Thank you very much for that. I think, unless there are any comments on the particular reports, Councillor Thomas.
I wanted to ask a question about that, really. The different councils which are getting together and which have all agreed on a particular proposal, have those councils collectively made a financial assessment of the viability, the financial viability of the new authority? Or do we, or how does it work? And do they evaluate alternative proposals to see whether they're financially viable? Just a question.
So that's kind of the stage at which that we're at the moment. So we're jointly preparing the submission, and part of that will be the financial business case for the new authority. If there are other proposals that come in a timely way that we're able to assess, we will assess those against kind of the model that we are working on, which is a footprint for the whole of East Sussex. So absolutely, and I know that Charlotte and Andrew are heavily involved in work to bring that financial modelling together.
Yes, I think we're in slight danger of straying on to overview and scrutiny territory. But I permitted that answer because I think it is a bit. Well, I think, yes, but we have a very specific role and internal audit is part of our concerns. I think the wider question of finance is probably, and indeed continuity, it's probably one for overview and scrutiny at their meeting. Some of us are double-hatted, so we will be able to do that. Sorry, Councillor McGurk, I overlooked your fact that you wanted to come in.
No problem. Thank you, Chair. And feel free to tell me if this is an issue for overview and scrutiny as well. But I was just wondering, there is an alternative, a different proposal we understand coming from Brighton, based on a 5 authority model. Will that be factored into our response at all? And will we have an opportunity to refer to that distinct model?
I think really that should be asked outside this committee. It's not technically within our remit. Overview and scrutiny are going to consider those sort of issues before the final report goes in. Could I ask Lorna to make contact with you outside this committee to answer that question? I think it'd be inappropriate to do it within the committee.
Fair enough, Chair. I understand that. Thanks.
Are there any questions on the specific reports? In which case, I think we can. I think this one we have to note rather than approve. Can humbly remind me.
Yeah. So resolve. Page 1 to 1. Yeah. So it's to be resolved.
Yep. Yes, we resolve. So we do have to resolve, first of all, that we note the performance and then we accept and back the internal audit manager's assessment of the state of play in Rother, which I think we do. Can I therefore propose that from the chair? Can I have a seconder? Yes, Councillor Thomas. Everybody in favour? Unanimous again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gary, for another comprehensive report. We now move on to the item 10, which is the Audit Committee self-assessment. Andrew, I think you're going to introduce this particular report.
Thank you, Chair. Both CITFAT and the external auditors recommend that self-assessment by the Audit Committee is best practice. So in late May, a group of members from the committee, including the previous chairman and the current chairman, and key officers met for several hours and went through the guidance and the scores and actions are in the report commensurate from that meeting. So the first appendix shows where the committee has scored itself against good practice. The committee scored quite highly, 175 out of 200. Most of the areas covered need no or any minor improvement. The only real exceptions to that are in the areas of developing skills and training, particularly if some members are new to the committee as well. So that they're really the highlights from that first appendix. We then moved on to evaluating the impact and effectiveness of the committee, and that is shown in the second appendix, where we looked at the strengths and weaknesses against various criteria and then recommended actions to improve where there were weaknesses identified. Those actions have then been pulled out of that second appendix into the third appendix to form an action plan. Starting on page 173, there are 17 actions for the committee to consider if it wishes us to take those forward and to make any amendments that you so wish, and would take any questions on any of those actions or any other aspects of the self-assessment.
Sorry, since I took part in that evaluation, I will sit back and allow my fellow members to ask questions and make comment. Silence is golden. You obviously think we did a good job. I think we were fairly self-critical, but the more we trawled, the more we thought on the whole, we didn't require that much improvement. There were areas, and I think in particular, we need training on a number of things, because we've got a number of new members, and even old dogs at audit work need to reflect on whether their practice is adequate or not. But therefore, can I take that first appendix, which is our self-assessment, that will be incorporated in some measure in our annual report, which will come here for approval. But can I take it, we give it our blessing to go forward as it is? Everybody happy with that? I don't think we need to resolve that, because eventually we will approve the annual report. Then we come to the other appendix. Are there any questions about that? Councillor Byrne, I thought you were. I thought we identified weaknesses and how to remedy them quite well, I think. If everybody's happy with that, can we accept that too? I will move from the chair. Seconded by Councillor Delaney. And everybody in agreement? Fine, that's agreed. In which case, we move forward on to agenda item 11. This is the new global internal audit standards. Obviously, we need to measure whether we are complying with those, or if not, what steps we're taking to comply. Gary, will you introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is the Global Internal Audit Standards, which I've mentioned quite a few times at this committee now, but I'll get to the point now where I need to get down to the detail of what we're going to do about them, what I'm going to do about them. The report gives you an update of on the progress on so in Appendix A. You've got an action plan that I drew up at the beginning of the year, and you see progress on there. In summary, made fairly good progress on 3 out of the 9 action points, as they've already been completed, and the further 3 are a work in progress. Since writing this report, I've also requested a separate meeting with this committee, an informal meeting, and I will be asking for a similar one with SLT, Senior Leadership Team, to discuss some new obligations and the standards which regarding the governance of internal audit function. I don't think there's anything too radical in there. It's probably all stuff that's already been done already, but I've just got to get your formal agreement to the essential conditions, as they call them. Once these meetings have taken place, I'm planning to get the formal approval to your agreement to these things at the September meeting. So it's just kind of make you familiar with it. There'll be a little bit of training for new members in that one as well. So hopefully you can all come along. But the key reason for the meeting is to talk about these standards, because they're a bit involved, and I've got to try and work out how to undense it a little bit for you, because it's quite difficult to go through. Elsewhere in the report, as part of the ongoing work to comply with the new global standards, I've drafted a new internal charter, which is in Appendix B, and a strategy document, which is in Appendix C. On the charter, I'm looking for members to approve the charter, subject to any amendments they might make at this meeting. Please note that whilst my line manager is currently the Deputy Chief Executive, Andrew, this will soon be changing with the new director, the Director of Governance and Community. So I was going to say maybe you could make a recommendation to agree in the report that you agree to, I can change all reference to that's relevant to the Deputy Chief Executive to the new director as my new line manager. and that saved me bringing the thing back again to amend it again, because it's going to change really quickly. I'm fairly comfortable with that thing, because the important thing about what I report to in the council, it's got to be independent, and preferably at the top table. So I'll still be reported to someone in the top table. I mean, whoever I report to will have other functions, and it could be argued that Andrew's got more of the financial functions than Butter will have. So it could even be a better fit. So we shall see. But I'm comfortable with it if members are comfortable with it. The internal strategy. Apologies also for the charter being a bit long-winded, because it's trying to cover all angles on the standard. It's a template they provided. Now I'll elaborate on it a little bit, but basically, it's what my obligations are to report stuff to yourselves, and what your obligations are to keep me in check, and things like that. So that's why it's a bit long-winded. On the other hand, the internal strategy is quite brief. And the reason for that is local government reorganisation, basically. I did not see... I've got to provide a strategy, produce a strategy to conform with the standards. I did not see the point, unless you disagree, on providing anything more comprehensive, because I could spend a lot of time drawing up a strategy, consultation, things like that, all for it to come to nothing when the council comes to an end of 2 years down the line. So what I've focused on, and this kind of comes back to the point we were talking about earlier about things what we can do for the council and for the future organisation, is I've got things in there. I've picked things that I think will be of worth to this council and the future one, rather than concentrating on improving internal audit service per se, which will largely be dealt with by conforming to the new standards anyway. So the idea is to see what I could do for the council and the future council. That one, strategy, it's a simple one-page template. Yeah, again, it's something produced by the Institute of Internal Auditors. And I will need members to be satisfied it's adequate to meet their expectations in this transitional period, and before recommending the document to council for approval and adoption. So that's what I've got on this one. Happy to take any questions.
It's a minor detail. I just wondered if this action plan could be RAG rated in the same way the strategy is, just because it's more visual.
No, I didn't RAG rate it. Perhaps I should have done. But the point is, I mean, there are all things that need to be done preferably by February next year. So I'm just picking off the easier ones. Well, I picked off the easier ones to do, and I'm working for the more difficult ones now. But I would have failed to deliver it if I hadn't delivered them all by the end of February, sort of thing. So it's all red, really.
In which case, we clearly need to approve the charter, but to amend, where necessary, the references to the line manager. We were assured, I recall from our last meeting, that as necessary, Gary will have direct access to the Chief Executive, and indeed as he does to the Chairman of this committee and the Vice Chairman, and indeed to the Audit Committee itself. So I think independence is guaranteed, which is the important thing. So can we approve that charter? Can somebody move, please? Councillor Cooper, Councillor Byrne seconding. Can we approve that? And then we need to move on to the internal audit strategy, which is on page 201. And I couldn't see any questions to ask about that. But has anybody any questions? I think think, Gary, you're getting off very lightly. We will approve that. Councillor Delaney, you have a question. Hold on.
It's not a question, it's more of a comment. It's just the number 3 there. I think partly meets your suggestion about internal audit cover for the new authority. Where you're talking about providing that advice and assurance to the new authority. So I think that's already been factored in some way. So you're ahead of us, Gary.
Right. It is given medium importance, and the recommendation is very clear. We think a new combined IE service should be in place, but in fact, we probably think that has high importance rather than medium. In a way, that shouldn't be too difficult because I think there's already close liaison between the various internal audit teams. But it's the kind of internal structure which we need to be thinking ahead, because we don't really know who will be on the shadow authority and how much experience they will have. It could be as in 1974, there were a lot of very experienced members, but equally possibly, given what's happened in places like Kent, you could land up with an awful lot of new members. So I think having robust processes in place recommended by people who know how these things are done and what value they have is pretty important. Gary, you wanted to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that I already liaised with my opposite numbers in Wilden and Eastbourne and Lewis. And we're all pretty much on the same page on this one. We'd all like to be getting early, if possible. It's not really my gift to have that. I'm relying on the powers that be, those that agree, like the Chief Executive and even the other Chief Executives. And that if your internal can form soon. I mean, we don't know what organisation we're going to be because you've got at the moment you've got some outside suppliers providing internal in East Sussex. I don't know if they will even exist when this happens. They might be, it might be free for all, or it might be just one big internal audit team for all I know. But it's fundamental to sort of audit requirements really that we like to get in early on when things are being changed in case there's any risks and controls that need to be put in place, because if we're going to be putting together several councils all together and things could get thrown out with that, and we haven't got all the answers. We're there for consultancy, but it's if we spot something that others don't that might help. So that's why we're getting there. Want to get in there early, and it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. But it's not my gift to get that. So and certainly won't be before September. But it's like once we know what the authority footprint of the place is going to be, and your more talks get a bit more advanced about how services can combine, then that's probably a time we need to have a cross-working party or something to try and say what we're going to do. So it's early days yet, but it's on my wish list of things to do.
I think we will back you in that. Secondly, there are quite a lot of discussions. I attended a Grant Thornton seminar on reorganisation and its pitfalls, and we can make the point over and over again that this is not just about East Sussex. I think actually throughout the reorganised authorities, they would benefit from thinking about this. So again, we can make the point via the LGA and via the conferences that we attend. If we can therefore, yes, please come.
What you just said.
We can. It will be for Cabinet to take it forward because they attend the LGA, presumably.
So, sorry, what was...
That we do actually not only regard this as an internal recommendation to East Sussex, but that we do actually stress it when talking to the LGA and at public conferences which people attend, because not everybody will be quite as cognizant with the value as we are. I think we had good service for the external organisation at East Sussex, though my experience ended in 2021. I don't know whether that continues, but of course that organisation will be friendless in the new shadow authority. So it's important, I think, the new shadow authority has it very high on its agenda also. So I think we're slightly upping the importance of that one, Gary, but with that one amendment and our remarks, I think we can approve Appendix C as well. Everybody agreed? Yes, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Byrne again, and we're all voting yes. Good, thank you very much indeed, Gary, for another excellent year's work. We now need to move to the work programme. That seemed to me not to require comment, but if there are any... Sorry, Chief Exec.
Yes, sorry, Chair, we've missed an item.
Oh, sorry, I should take, sorry, I will jump back.
It's a verbal update.
We have added an item, and I feel we've got to tell you we've added an item. So please blame me. We need to report on the process of appointing an independent person, which has not gone as smoothly as we would hope. Our existing independent person, although permitted to reapply, has so far chosen not to reapply. We have had two candidates who have various skills to offer, but neither are trained accountants. On balance, looking at those two, I think it will be advantageous if we re-advertise and see if we can get a slightly wider field to choose from. It really seemed to me too narrow a field, particularly as, while they have many virtues, they obviously lack one, which we might regard as important. I think, though, it will be worth keeping them in play as well. I think both have something to recommend them. It's just they're not quite the independent person that we envisaged in our job description. Is that recommendation acceptable? Councillor Cooper.
I'm just wondering where that's advertised.
Sorry, I didn't get to it.
I was just wondering where it was advertised.
I don't know. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we only used digital means to advertise, so it went into the Rother Bulletin, which name is escaping me right now. Apologies. Sorry. My Alerts, yes. It went into My Alerts. It was on our website, and we also used a further job advertising press that's used locally, but we didn't put it in the local paper. So that is an option for an extended round, that we could put it in a printed paper, which we didn't do the first time round. The other thing the committee might like to consider is the criteria that we set last time mandated that you needed to live or work within the Rother district. We could expand that with a perimeter outside of the Rother district, so that it's still reasonable that the individual would be able to regularly attend an in-person meeting if the committee were open to that. That's another option as well.
Since we have officers who travel in from outside the district, it would seem we are being unduly restrictive. I think within relatively easy travelling distance of Rother would be a good thing. I think we probably ought to stipulate, though, that members, the candidates would need to be able to attend meetings in Bexhill. So we catch both aspects. We don't want to limit it geographically, but they must be able to attend meetings. What I don't want is an independent person sitting on the remote the whole time. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Do we set any parameters, like the must-haves and nice-to-haves, against so we can validate the candidates against? Have we already got that? So it's not really a candidate-led, oh, that looks better than this. We already have a grid against which to match the candidate and assess the suitability. And does this committee have sight of those?
It would be useful for that to be recirculated in view of the change of membership of the committee. So I will arrange for that to be done.
Thank you.
Everybody happy with what I propose? I don't think I need to put that to a resolution. It's a process which we're going through. Now we move on to the last item, which is the work programme. Is everybody content with that, or any improvements to suggest? Clearly the two... sorry, Gary.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add another update on the Global Internal Audit Standards on the 29th of September. So and hopefully that's when I can get the conditions agreed as well, so for the standards. So kill two birds, one stone, hopefully.
Yes, I think that should be easily enough to add. We have the programme really up to March. I just wonder, given the rather risky environment we're in, we have a risk update in September and in March, routine. I think we should be prepared if there is any change, not if there's no change, to look at that more frequently. But I think at the moment I'm happy to leave it at those two.
We do have one on the 21st of July.
Yes, we have one in July.
Yeah.
And we've got one in September and March, none in December. That's probably all right, but just in case there is any shift, I would ask Charlotte to feel free to add one if she needs to. Are there any other points to make about the work programme? In which case, can we note it? And I think that brings us to the end of our deliberations. Can I thank you all for your attendance and declare this meeting closed at 8:40.